Hi, everybody. I am Matt with K15T, and welcome to our live stream where we are going to talk about the right way, the correct way, the awesome way to create documentation in Confluence. And I think I can speak pretty confidently on this topic because I have a lot of practice in the wrong way to create documentation in Confluence. That's actually how I met people at K15T, because I did enough wrong things that I was like, help, please. That seems like a lifetime ago now. God, a long time ago. But here we are. So let's talk about it. Y'all, it's so nice to see you all in the chat. Hi, Chad. Hi, Lamar. Hey, George. It's nice to see everybody here. The chat proves we are live, which means please throw your questions and your remarks in the chat. We want to keep it going. Hit that like button in YouTube if you would, and maybe even the subscribe button if you know what's good for you. The like button tells the algorithm that we are doing cool stuff here today. And that is the plan. So please hit that like button. If you have a question, use hashtag question in the chat just to help us find you. And by us, I mean myself and Mix Master Stefan, who is also in the chat, dropping links like they're hot and so on and so forth. It's nice to have you all here. Also, I just wanted to mention, there is too much to talk about in an hour. I had to cut this down majorly to try to fit all the stuff in here, but there is just too much. So throughout the webinar or throughout the live stream, if you're like, hey, I would love to hear more about this thing that you're talking about that we're having to move on from, please let us know, because we might do a lot more about documentation in Confluence if y'all are interested, because there is so much more to say. Also, we at K15T, we make apps for Confluence that actually helps with some of these things we'll talk about today. But this live stream is full of stuff you can do in Confluence. We are not here to talk about K15T apps. We'll probably mention some of those. But if you're like, oh, but I wanted to see like what your apps do, fear not. We will have a webinar on September 10th that you can join, and it's kind of the continuation of the story, kind of like all of these movie reboots that are happening right now where you're like, I didn't want to hear more of the story. I mean, I did want to hear more of the story. Oh, thank God you revised this intellectual property 25 years later. So you can join on September 10th as we'll go into further detail. We'll drop the link in the chat. But now, without further ado, I just can't stand it anymore. I need to introduce some guests because I have some guests from K15T joining. First of all, David, welcome to the live stream. It's so wonderful to see your face on here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You can send the check to me anytime. It's really great having you here, David. Erica is also joining us. Hi, Erica. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine. And hi, everyone.
Hi. And then finally, if I can figure out how to unmute her, Laura is also joining. Laura, is your audio working? Let's just double check.
I hope so.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Wonderful. Hi, Laura. It's so great to have you here. Good. David, Erica, and Laura are absolute experts on the topic of documentation, and they are here from across the company, which is really fantastic. So it is not just my expertise here. I am joined by the greatest minds of my generation, at least that I work with. So hi, everybody. We are going to jump into this. Now, like I said, hashtag question in the chat. If you have specific questions, we will try to get to them as soon as possible. Otherwise, let's begin at the beginning. And that is to say, we're going to talk about 5 phases of documentation today. There's lots of different models for how people think about creating documentation. We kind of have broken our thoughts into 5 phases because it's a very cyclical process. So the first phase being planning. So planning is where, you know, and you may be in that phase right now, right? Maybe you're like, okay, our team has identified we want to improve our product documentation, our internal process documentation, our project documentation, something like that. But what do we need to keep in mind? What do we need to think about now to be kinder to our future selves? The next phase would be the creation phase. So this is actually in that process when we're actually writing things, when we're making new pages in Confluence, when we're laying things out in the content tree, there's a lot of things that need to be done in the creation phase to benefit us in the future. There's the review phase. So in the review phase, that's where you're getting peer review on your work. You're using tools like Rovo to review your content or proofread your content, that sort of thing. Looking at, has it been written properly for accessibility and that sort of thing. Then there's the publishing phase. So that is, we have our content, it's ready to go. How are we getting it in the hands of whomever our audience is? And then finally, the often forgotten maintenance phase, which is also a really great podcast. Would recommend maintenance phase. But in this context, maintenance is all about looking at what you've got out there, looking at what you're sharing, and figuring out how to improve it using analytics, using feedback from folks, that sort of thing. So David, I wanted to turn attention to you first because you, in your role on the Scroll Documents team, you have talked to
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah, whenever we talk to people at events or to prospects, generally we either speak to the technical writer who's all into XML editing and so on, or you speak to someone who's using Confluence in their company, but they've never actually written documentation before, right? So we're generally pitching this from two different sides usually. But where both of these meet is the simplicity of Confluence, I think, especially in the the latter group, that's worth a lot. Generally, if you can use a computer or the internet, you'll figure out how to edit a page in Confluence. So that's very accessible just for the general audience, to anyone at the company. You don't have to be an authoring expert. Then its general collaborative nature, and that generally gets some risen eyebrows from authors that really don't want anybody to mess around in their documentation. But you can collaborate in Confluence. You don't really have to. And also, you don't necessarily need to give everybody the permissions to edit your live documentation. But if you need feedback, you just mention someone right there, and they'll get notified and can just answer to your question. So the simplicity that comes at the beginning can be extended with apps. For example, you can't put like mathematical formulas, for example, on a page in Confluence by default. But is there an app out there for it? There sure is. Yeah, those I think are the main parts about authoring. But then looking at the larger organizational context, it's scalable. So if you add new people, they always have access to Confluence if they have an account for your Atlassian suite. And within that suite, you are easily connected to Jira, and you can connect your Confluence to a Jira Service Management. So it's just part of something bigger that your organization can run on. It's not some siloed off tool that's only used by the tech writing nerds at your company.
But silos are so cool, David. Why would you want everybody to have access to the tool where you're writing documentation? That's crazy talk.
It is crazy talk to some.
Yeah, that is actually, so that is the reason that at my last gig, I started using Confluence for documentation. Was I was using did a XML system, which was great and was valuable in so many ways. But I literally had one of my managers who was reviewing my content. I handed him yet another PDF to review because that was how review was done at that time in that system. And he was like, I will not do this anymore. Find another way. And he's like, make it like Google Docs where I can just look through and comment on it. And I was like, okay, there's got to be something. And that's where Confluence came out to play initially. And then I was like, oh, I forgot about the whole planning phase, and I regret that now. So Laura, what sorts of documentation have you seen teams actually like writing in Confluence? What sort of stuff are people making together?
Yep. quite a lot of things actually. When we give demos, actually, people usually tell us, I have some sort of documentation in Confluence and I need to better manage it or publish it or so on. And then we always ask what kind of documentation, right? And it's usually very specific to their team, and depending on what the team is, they might want to capture different things. So I think in general, anything that kind of needs to live somewhere for someone else to consult at a later time is probably considered some kind of documentation. So if we just take ourselves as an example, like it could be technical documentation, which is mainly in a development team. So I mean, I could also share what that could look like. There's there's usually in technical documentation you could find something like technical specs or maybe diagrams, stuff like that, documenting APIs. And then you also have stuff like end user documentation or product documentation, right? So the target user here aren't really, are maybe more external people, right? So here we're talking about things like usability of the docs, internal lingo is probably something that you should be wary about. So the whole conversation changes when you look at end user documentation or product documentation. Internal documentation could be anything really from, I don't know, for example, we internally document how to separate waste in Confluence. That could be one thing, or how to use a coffee machine, or more technical stuff, how to use the software that you use internally. There could also be employee handbooks when someone comes in for the first time to guide them through how the company works. But also knowledge bases, which are kind of like more of this pool of information that you could easily search for if you have a question and don't want to disrupt someone by messaging them on Slack, for example. So you can see it's almost everything, documentation. So encompasses quite a lot of things, I would say.
I think this is really reminding me of, so jumping into the planning phase of documentation, which is like I mentioned, this is the part of the phases that when I first started in Confluence, I just was like, whatever, and then regretted it later. And there are so many things we could talk about. Like I said, we do not have enough time, but one of the main topics that really stood out, and I think Laura has spoken a little bit to, is understanding your audience. And Erica, you are an expert in the needs of audiences, particularly around accessibility, but just in general, I would love to know, like, what are the things that teams need to consider when they're like, we are writing our documentation when it comes to audience?
Yeah, I think like it's not because it's the first stage or anything, but this is key for anything that follows, right? And knowing your audience will determine like how you write your documentation, what sort of language you are using, or also you need to think, okay, are the people I'm writing for these documents or whatsoever, are they starting their journey or are they already experts? And even if you're not sure about that, then I would say it's just safe to first start with a getting started page and slowly disclose all this knowledge that I'm sure everyone's like so looking forward to share, but just being careful of not overwhelming like the end person. And yeah, I would say it's also important to like make it easy for your audience to find what they're looking for. And when starting to plan and thinking about this whole thing, it's also about the needs of your audience. Like, where are they going to access this documentation from? Is it going to be on a big screen, on a small screen, or is it even going to be a screen at all? So I think like these are all these little things that have to be very part of the planning stage to be able to shape like like good documentation, accessible documentation, as you mentioned, because it's very easy to get very excited and I don't know, start having too much fun with emojis because we know we like them, but then all this affects our end users and makes our documentation less accessible. So I would say like who you have always to keep this in mind, like who is on the other side of the screen or of the paper, of the PDF.
Which is funny. we got a question from Liz in the chat asking, what was the most surprising thing you found out you were doing wrong when creating and sharing documentation in Confluence? And actually, for me, audience was a huge one. When I first started, I was writing for myself, because I was like, I just want it this way, and I like my style. And then I realized like I was not communicating the right things. I wasn't focusing on the right things. And for me, I was lacking those getting started guides you mentioned. Like I was like, if you're going to submit something in the order process, you are going to get all the info. But people were just like, how do I get to the order process? Right? Like I was just skipping the like you couldn't see the forest through the trees. Is that an expression? Do y'all have other examples where like you just you missed something completely in what you were writing or how you were organizing it?
I think for me, like as a developer, it's also very easy to sometimes forget, okay, maybe people don't even understand what I'm talking about, or maybe this one thing I'm trying to explain, of course they know the app already, and then no, like just leaving links here and there, giving hints to the end user or to anyone that's like reading this documentation, and not taking anything for granted, I would say. I think that would be my biggest mistake. I'm like, oh yeah, this is easy, done that. But yeah, not everyone knows what you think they already know.
Any other wild examples from everybody? Just things you were like, oh, wow, we could do better.
Yeah, maybe a very, very, very simple thing. So when I got started with Confluence, it was Confluence Server, Confluence 6. And back then, we didn't have the nicely centered paragraphs in the editor. It just started at the very left on your screen and went all the way across the screen. So the first time I was documenting a new feature, I wrote up 3 lines. I was like, "Wow! I put all of this into 3 lines of text. Go me!" And even back then, we already published this whole thing to a help center. And so then I switched into the help center view, and then I realized that my 3 lines in Confluence turned out to be like a page and a half on the user screen. And that was the first time. Well, maybe it was not as concise as I thought. And yeah, but that just shows you how important it is to actually look at your content through the user's eyes.
So yeah, publish it, like the way you publish something matters.
Yeah.
That is so true. Yeah, what's the word? Pithy. I had a coworker introduce me to the English word pithy, which I was like, excuse me, what did you call me? And he's like, you could have said that much simpler. Like get rid of all these filler words, like the way you're describing this is too much. And I was like, pithy. Okay, interesting. David, I know the team has done some work in the past. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the planning phase is for teams that already have something written down, right? Like maybe they're like, okay, we want to formalize this, but we have other documentation in other places, or we have old documentation that we want to like kind of audit, explore what we have and fix it up, like bring it up to our standards so we can share it. What sort of experiences has the team had, and what would you share here for those people, for those teams in this planning phase?
Yeah, I mean, planning phases in general vary wildly because the state in which you start can also be very, very different. So one of the top personas, I would say, we encounter in demos or in support, people that reach out after being hired as the first and sole tech writer at a company. And so they have, maybe it's a mid-sized company, about 30, 50 people, and they're the only person doing documentation. So they're coming in, they're new. They obviously don't know what the products do. Maybe they don't even know who might know that, right? And generally what we recommend is just do like an internal audit, basically. Just try and dig up. Somebody is gonna know this, right? If people are using let's say it's a software product, somebody at your company will know how these things work, and if they know, then people are gonna ask them. So that means it's very likely that somebody has put down something they maybe not realize is documentation, but it's where the knowledge is to be found. Like an interesting example from our team internally, we have this super old page in our Confluence space. It's the software design document. It's very official,
Oh, what a
and this is
classic. What a
something.
good read.
Yeah, but every now and then, somebody that have never spoken to before, maybe they're developer, recent hire, and they come out and like, oh, your software design document, awesome. I was working on this integration, and just it had all the information I ever needed, and it's hidden so well, very deeply. But if it's valuable, people will always find it. They will come back to it, and we always urge developers to update it whenever we make any meaningful changes. And every company in or organization, in some way, has this like shadow documentation that is somewhere. It might be on in someone's personal space in Confluence, or maybe on their desktop. But it's chances are it's out there somewhere. So just don't be afraid to dig.
It's somewhere. Sometimes the information is in somebody's head, and the best thing you can do is figure out how to get it out of their head. Later, we'll talk a little bit about the connection between Loom and Confluence and how valuable that is for those people who have what is known as the curse of knowledge, which is they know so much that unpacking all of that is so difficult that they like can't without some assistance. So let's move. We've talked a little bit about the planning phase. There is so much more we could talk about, but alas, we have not the time. We should write more about that. Let's talk about the authoring phase, which is potentially where a lot of teams are, because a lot of teams tend to start authoring before they're planning, right? Unless you're like a really great planner, most teams are like, okay, we're just sort of in it. And by the way, Tim, I saw your question on not being able to add attachments in the new cloud editor. I have not experienced that. Could you like clarify that or drop like maybe an issue in there? Is that anything anyone here has run into?
Yeah. I think he's referring to the fact you used to be able to add attachments from other pages, just include them in your on server. That was a thing, and yeah, people migrating to cloud. I think it's something that's no longer allowed. It's a limitation, but I think it's something that's very reasonable actually. Because otherwise, you include the attachments from a different space, which later gets restricted, and nobody knows why your image is no longer working. So it's difficult to keep track of where those images come from, for example. And I don't think there is a workaround.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This strategy, it aligns with what Confluence maybe started out as being, a wiki, but it's changed a bit in its DNA. I'm actually going to be working on a video soon all about managing files, different strategies for managing files in Confluence or with third-party tools integrated with Confluence. So I'll make sure this is talked about because, yeah, that's a pretty big change for teams. Talking about authoring, Erica, templates. Okay, for people coming, especially if they're coming from technical writing, there's a lot of technical writing tools where you can highly restrict what people do. And you say, these are the types of documentation topics people can write. And here are the things they're allowed to put in it. And here are the things that are not. We have templates in Confluence, but it's a bit of a different vibe. Can you talk about how teams would use templates to help with the authoring process, but not like control it too much?
Yeah, I would like say templates, at least how we use them at K15T. I'm not sure if I'm already sharing my screen, but I'm sharing, like, for example, our troubleshooting article template. That's
wrong screen.
That's not me.
That's
me. Perfect.
That's you.
Yeah, so we have, like, for example, I really love templates, first of all, because I panic when I see a blank page. I don't know about all of you, but I really panic. I don't know where to start. I just start, like, I don't know, writing whatever comes out, and it can work, but it's traumatic experience, I would say. So how we use templates inside K15T, it's more like this hand-holding and also a bit of like, hey, like, don't forget this, remember to do this. For example, in here we have like a checklist, and then we also have even like an example of what it could look like. And it just goes like helping the writer, focusing more on the content and what's important rather of struggling on what sections should go or what to do. So I would say it's a really good tool to get started and also to have a bit of structure within the company. And also we sometimes use like some templates when we're also not only in documentation but also for meetings, and it just helps everyone be on the same page. So I would really recommend, and I'll just give another quick example. We have like also our how-to article. Once again, like it does give you like an idea what you should do, like write a page title, like title case, give like what is a how-to article, what to do before you start, because it's also like, okay, not thinking they're already ready to start doing whatever you're going to ask them to, but rather always having in mind all these like the prerequisites and so on. But what I wanted to go with there is that we have this template, but sometimes our how-to articles also you just look like this. Like there's not all these sections we included, but we do still have like at the core, like we do have like lists because it makes like the user understand easier the steps they have to go through. And we're using like at the beginning of this one, we have like a video because it's also one of our suggestions. Like, hey, maybe they don't want to read. Maybe they want to like watch a video, and that's also fine. But I think we're going to discuss this a bit later with Loom. But the whole point is that, yeah, I would say templates are not about restricting, but rather helping to start.
I think templates are such a game changer for, like, there are people who have expertise on like knowing how to lay out content, what content should be where, you know, all of those things. And templates are just a way of sharing that knowledge with anybody. And then, you know, there's nobody who's like, well, I can't do documentation because I don't know how. It's like the template will guide you, which is great. And the template will not control you. It will not constrict you. So also like respect what the template is suggesting, because there's a reason for it. David, when teams are writing content, they need to think about the next version of the content, you know, the next version of the documentation or different editions of the documentation. Could you like share, what do teams need to keep in mind here? Because this is where I started to have trouble by not planning things ahead of time when I was doing this.
Yeah, when talking to users or just in general to documentation authors, oftentimes I refer to them as you think about your documentation. Let's say it's a product that you document. You're generally thinking about it as one thing, but more often than not, it's actually a bunch of different things. And this is what we call an edition, which is a great and simple term. What it means is your documentation might have different, let's call them dimensions. And if you can now maybe put my screen on the screen.
Absolutely.
Here. And this sounds like super scientific when it's not. So let's try and have some fun with dimensions, shapes, and colors. I'll try to go through it quickly and easily. So, all right,
home,
let's
kids.
say, yeah, let's say you have a documentation for your user A. It documents something. Then let's say you sell this this product and it's installed. You start using it, but then you still keep developing it, right? So then with your new version of your product, your documentation needs to adjust. So maybe it's going to be something like this, right? So you added this little thing, and then over time, it generally does grow, right? Here within the main block, things change as well, right? But this is one of the dimensions. Versions this is how I like to think about it. Versions are how content changes over time. So your product develops, and so does your documentation, because these two things obviously need to match, right? So this is one way of having different editions. And another way is, let's say you have some sort of a service or a product that you deliver and install at your customer on site, right? So in this case, maybe you started out with the same product that you installed both for user A and user B. And so you start at the same point, but then maybe the requests that user B will have are going to be different, right? So your product is also going to be growing here over time, but maybe it's going to grow in a different way. And this, like these different lanes or flavors of documentation, as we described it in the past, this is what we call variants, right? So, and these two things exist alongside each other, right? And you might have customers that are still on a very old version of something and they just like it and they want to keep using it, right? Just like Confluence long-term support versions, for example. And so those docs need to still be available if you want to export them and send it to your users, or or otherwise maybe make it available on your help center. So these are things that ideally you think about them when you plan your documentation, but at least remember them when you're authoring. And oftentimes we find out people just publish their initial versions, so essentially this, and then they realize, oh, now I need to continue working on it because the product that we're documenting or whatever it might be is also changing.
This
These are
these are the basis of additions, which it gets pretty wild, especially when you're also like, well, what if we offered it in different languages as well? And these are the things you want to think about while you're planning initially, but then how you actually create things in Confluence matters a lot. And you can do this by like basically like having two different spaces, right? Where you're maintaining version 1, version 2, but then as soon as you start to say, well, we have version 1 for user A and version 1 for user B, and then version 2 for, you can see how you're very quickly creating lots and lots of copies of the content. That is how you would do it in Confluence. But very quickly it bumps into, oh my God, how do I manage all of the versions, variants, and potentially even languages for all of these additions that I need to share out with the world? And that's actually where the K15T app would come in to help, like Scroll Documents, which you can see in the webinar on the 10th. Very quickly, before we move out of the topic of authoring, I just wanted to share Loom, because it's kind of a passion of mine. Loom matters a lot to me, and I think it's really helpful for, like I said, those situations where someone has knowledge and it's very hard for them to share that knowledge. So here is Loom. One of the things they just rolled out for Loom, if you're not familiar with Loom, it's a really quick way to share videos with people. You can just capture yourself on camera, and it will transcribe everything you say so people can read a transcript. It's super powerful. One of the things I wanted to show very quickly that is so great, I talked about how difficult it is to get knowledge out of people's heads sometimes, especially, if you're working with an engineer who they're focused on creating, they're writing code, they're creating value in that way. And so the brain shift to like talking about what is going on, why is it going on, can be difficult. You can set up meetings with these people, and now you can use the meeting integration between Loom and Confluence. I always set it up to make it so I can manually select which meetings I want Loom to record. But once you've set it up, it connects directly to your calendar. Once you've set it up, you can have Loom drop into your meeting. It records everything that's been said, and then it will create a full transcript of that conversation. But then from Loom, you can use AI to write it up in a different way. You can take that transcript and help you create the basis of your documentation. So when you're authoring, keep in mind that not everybody loves to sit down and type, or has the time or the interest or the ability or whatever. And so using tools like Loom for that can be highly effective for getting that information out of people's heads. Okay, now we need to move on to the world of content review. And Laura, I would love to know about some of the ways teams can review content, because we have a lot of different tools on our hands. And also, frankly, I think we have team members who don't like this part of the process, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I think both sides probably have difficulties with the process, both the feedback, the person who needs the feedback and the person who receives the feedback, who gives the feedback. One, because if you need the feedback, a really common problem could be getting the attention of someone, right? Especially if they're really busy. And those tend to be the people who have a lot of knowledge and yeah, very valuable. And then also as someone who's giving the feedback, obviously you need to kind of carve out the time to do that. Now, to tackle the first problem of getting someone's attention, Confluence is obviously a really great tool to get someone's attention because you have a lot of ways. If you have already written something, and it doesn't have to be the final version, it could just be a draft, you could really easily get their attention by mentioning them on a page or sharing the page with them. Or even better, if you have a specific detail, sometimes it's just really just a detail, you could even put an inline comment to your page and then ask a specific question. And that's actually something that I learned along the way. Is if you are asking for a review, it's not just sharing the page and telling people, hey, review it. It's my first draft. What do you think? But it's also, there's probably a good reason why you asked that specific person. And that reason could really change depending on who that person is. So for example, a subject matter expert, you probably want, what you want from them is to verify that everything you wrote is accurate, right? Whereas a lot of us at K15T, we're not native English speakers, so we might pull in someone from marketing who is a native English speaker, not to kind of verify the information, because they wouldn't know, but to do some spell checking or just to check if there are better ways to express the information. And then there's also a third dimension, like is the usability, right? Especially if it's product documentation, but not only, even internal documentation sometimes needs a good review in terms of usability. So it's not just about effectively drawing someone's attention to it, and Confluence comes with the right tools, but also specifying in your message what do you actually want the person to have a look at, because you don't want a subject matter expert to correct your grammar, right? If they have better things to contribute with. So those are kind of the things that I can think about now.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to correcting your grammar, use Rovo. If you have access to Rovo, that's exactly what that is for. And you can actually create agents in Rovo. So you could create an agent and say, hey, agent, because you're writing a prompt, and you can say, hey, here is all of our domain lingo. So here's the specific words that we use and what they mean. Here are the types of users that I have and the information they care about. Even like here are the types of colleagues that review my work and the concerns they have. And Rovo can give you an incredible first pass. And it will even, you can say, ask questions or point out things that I've missed in this topic. And it's an amazing assistant at just realizing like, oh my God, I totally missed something. Or wow, I didn't, in my case or Erica's case, like I dove way too deep into the technical and like I didn't intro this at all, things like that. Use Rovo for that if you can, because it helps with that review process. So then what you hand to your colleagues is much more in a better shape. So they can use their brain power for not correcting your grammar and instead, pointing out what they're experts in.
Just a quick note, adding to that really quick. I think that's also where we could also use like page properties to like give a bit of context of the page to whoever is reviewing, or to Rovo as well. Just like mentioning like the audience that you already know because you thought about it in the planning, and also like the context of this documentation. That way you don't have to be rewriting the prompt to Rovo or rewriting it in your message. Just put it in the page properties, and at the moment of publishing or something, you hide them or remove them. But I think that's also something very useful.
Absolutely. Really quick, we have a question from Lynn in the chat wondering about blueprints. Are people using those? Are there any suggestions and best practices? Blueprints, if you don't know, it's the way of actually deploying a set of Confluence templates all at the same time, even sometimes with some variables filled out. But as of like with cloud, blueprints, I feel like have kind of gone by the wayside. Y'all, are you seeing teams using blueprints at the moment?
It's not ringing a bell, no.
Yeah, Blueprints, it was a grand idea that seems to have not made the jump from data center. They never did build a good UI around it even. It's a very cool concept that I'm afraid, Lynn, it's just not going to see the light of day the way I would like. Speaking of things I would like to talk a little more in review about following workflows and also reporting, but unfortunately, we don't have too much time for that. But of course, if you'd like to hear more from us about how to manage your documentation workflow and how to do some reporting using tools like content statuses, labels, and even some workflow apps, drop that in the chat so we know you have interest, because unfortunately we just don't have time to talk about these things. Because we need to move on to publishing, which is huge and another downfall of mine when I was doing this, because I was like, yeah, I wrote everything in Confluence, and my manager was like, cool. How are you sharing that with our customers? And I was like, uh-oh. And that was how I stumbled upon K15T, because I was like, these are the needs I have for publishing. But Erica, I would love if you would like talk a little bit about what are some of the things to consider when you're thinking about a publishing path. Like what do teams need to keep in mind?
I'll try to keep it short and sweet
Yeah, good
because
luck.
of time. Yeah. But definitely, I think like exactly what you just mentioned. I think the first thing should be to consider access. Like, is this for internal or external use? And if it's for external, do these people have access to Confluence? And if not, how do you get it out there? That's a very good question, right? And of course, then we can think about building a site from it or having it exported into HTML. But also, then it's like, okay, do these people will have access to the internet when they're also trying to access this knowledge you want to share to them? So I think that's also another very good point to think about, because in this case, then maybe we drop the idea of having a help center or website and move on to either HTML or to PDF, where things are like more controlled and also don't need internet. And then I think a second point is also like, how much does presentation matter? Like, can it just be like black and white text and then we're done for the day, or do you need your brand present, either not only for the looks but also to build trust in the content that you're sharing? So that's also very important to think about. And I think something else would be, for example, are the links you're sharing? Because once again, we're trying to connect the dots, right? So probably your documentation will have links to other pages or to other websites. Are these links stable? I think that's also very important to consider. Or if it's going to be printed, are then the links present in this printed page, or are they just like this underlined text saying, yes, access this here, and then, yeah, good luck clicking that, you know? So I think that that's some of the things we can have in mind. And last but not least, like David already mentioned, editions, I would just add to that, okay, all these editions, do they have to be accessible later on, or can we just be burning the history? Probably shouldn't, so don't, but yeah, other thing to keep in mind.
It's funny, you say good luck clicking a link in a PDF, but I continue, when I'm holding a photo, I continue to have the urge to zoom in on people's faces. And I'm like, oh no, I'm ruined forever.
Yes.
Liz was wondering, can we have a Confluence best practice 2-a-days? Liz, are you just saying you want like 2 days of Confluence best practices from us? Because yeah, that sounds great. We'll just go live and I'll just be like, David, you have the floor. Just talk endlessly about managing editions. That would be great. If everybody wants 2 days we'll do 48 hours of Confluence best practices. That sounds exhausting. I might get a sponsorship with like an energy drink company, but that would be very fun. Speaking of, David, can you show, like, kind of quickly, unfortunately, how would teams, and we talked about this a little bit, how would teams manage publishing content in Confluence? And by publishing, I mean like sharing content with folks in Confluence. and having like a space where we can author safely and people aren't messing with our stuff, and then sharing it in Confluence? How would we do that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are multiple ways to do it. Sometimes your internal audience can be very sizable. One way of doing it, obviously, is just, I guess you can just share the link if you're comfortable with sharing the exact pages on which you might be editing and revising that content. You can obviously copy it into some sort of a public place. And if you may return to the screen here for a second, or our app, Scroll Documents, for example, has a built-in feature to publish within Confluence. So you might think if you have a, let's say, an employee handbook, for example, and then you need to start updating it because maybe some legal requirements change next year, then you probably are not going to make all the changes on December 31st. You might do it ahead of time, and then you want to publish everything at once. And this is specifically what this is supposed to do. You just select the edition by picking the version and the variant, for example. This example is just our internal Scroll Documents documentation. But then you could just update wherever it is all at once. And the good thing about updating it through Scroll Documents here is it keeps the actual pages. So if people have commented before, then you would keep those as opposed to just replacing it with a fresh copy from your secret authoring space.
And without Scroll Documents, would you recommend most teams use like the content manager if they have the access to the content manager to do that like bulk kind of copying maneuver, but then you're also deleting pages?
Yeah, I mean, content manager, just the normal, I think they renamed it to duplicate recently, action works as well.
Okay.
If you just check copy children pages as well, that works. But I think there is a page limit to that at 200, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, essentially you're outdating the content that you have previously published. And but I would definitely do it all in bulk, because that way, if these pages, for example, are linking each other, then the resulting pages will still be linking each other, and no links will go back into the authoring space.
And keep in mind, everyone, if y'all are publishing your documentation in Confluence for whatever audience, make sure that is kept in mind when y'all are having budgeting conversations about who should have access to Confluence, because then it's not just access to a tool for collaboration. It's literally who should have access to our internal knowledge. So just keep that in mind. Make sure your systems administrators, your other leaders who are in those talks are aware of this, because it's so much more than, people need to know this is access to knowledge, not just access to a collaboration tool, which is really important to keep in mind. Laura, talk to me a little bit about what if I wanted to publish my content online? What options do I have?
Yeah, so from Confluence, so kind of the easiest options would be the good old anonymous access. So for those of you who don't know, that's basically a space setting that only space admins can work with, to make your whole space available on the internet to everyone. I think even search engines will crawl it. At least I've seen it sometimes pop up in search engines. So this is a really easy way. So you already have your content in Confluence, and the biggest downside to that is probably that, especially if it's an end user documentation, it's an audience that is not familiar with the Confluence, they'll be confronted with the UI of Confluence, right? So that's kind of the downside, and it's available for everyone on the internet, which can be a good thing, right? Especially if your product is available out there for everyone to buy. But again, like, it's not working for everyone. There's also a relatively new feature that kind of competes with anonymous access, and that's it's public links. So public links are special in the way that they're really just meant for sharing single pages, because what you'll do is also something that your admin will need to enable for you. But once you enable it for a specific page, you have this link, and whoever has that link can access your Confluence page with limited functionality. So it's mainly meant to be for consumers of the content, right? They'll not be able to edit or anything. And they will have a nicer view, but it's really just meant for sharing this one page. And again, everyone who has the link will be able to see it. But other than that, it's pretty secure in the way that it will not just pop up in search engines. And obviously, for a lot of teams, that's not enough. So a lot of teams will want to share content outside of Confluence online as a proper help center knowledge based site that is properly styled and branded, not confusing. I mean, Confluence is a great wiki tool, but it's not meant to be this website that you access as an end user to consult information. So that's where site builders come in. So yeah, what Matt is sharing now is an example of so our friends at AppFire, Agile Poker for Jira, is an app they have just chosen to kind of publish it as a normal Confluence space, which works fine for them. But if you wanted to have a little bit more branding, a few yeah, just a nicer UX, what you would do is maybe use a site builder like Scroll Sites, which would basically take the same content, so spaces in your Confluence, but just produce this nice looking site that does not look at all like Confluence and does not confuse your users. And then you just choose which spaces to publish. So the boxes there on the bottom, those are individual spaces. So you would never tell that this is built, that this comes from Confluence. So you have all of the advantage of working on Confluence without the confusing UI, maybe sometimes slower loading times that would frustrate people who just come there to read. So lots of options, and I guess for everyone there's a better solution. It's not a one size fits all thing.
Right. And it's funny, like when it comes to publishing online, you also have the interesting, you have to figure out, what do people trust? Does anonymous access and showing something that looks like a Confluence space, is that enough for your users, or are they going to be like, that doesn't look like whatever brand, like that URL looks funky? Like there's so many things to consider when it comes to publishing online, especially as people are becoming more and more sus about, phishing scams and things have gotten on the rise, and they want to see the trust in the brand along with the content. And very quickly, Erica, talk to me about, what if I wanted to export things as like a document? How would I do that from Confluence, for those people who need a PDF, who want a PDF?
So if you can share my screen real quick, we can just give this as example. Like, we have talked about different types of documents. Now I'm bringing like a document that is very like short, which is like a fact sheet or could also be considered as a product brief. And this one is for a scroll PDF exporter. And if we would want it to get it out to the world as a PDF, of course, we can use Confluence native exporter, which is right here, and click export to PDF. I already have actually my copy here ready. So, and I also did add a bit of like, for example, this header right here, just to have it like present in all the pages through CSS, and bam, we have a PDF export. And just for those who are curious, like, yes, you can style a bit more to just go into your space settings, look and feel, and then you can access here these like CSS style sheets where you can go as creative as you want. I must say I was trying to figure it out 1 hour before the live stream, and the header is as far as I went. But still, then there's other option as well, which is scroll PDF exporter, which I would consider it's also a great option. And I'll just show you what came out of our scroll PDF exporter. So, of course, this is something that makes your brand pop up more. The user experience to get this, you don't need CSS, which as a front-end developer, I love my CSS, but if I can not use it, that's also good. And yeah, we have like this example right here. And of course, as we mentioned, like there's just multiple use cases, and I could talk for hours about this, but I'll just spare you and just once again, we're back to templates, but these ones are PDF templates, and it's just to mention that as there's like a template for Confluence for any of your documentation, there's also a PDF template to export your documentation and make it feel just right. So yeah, I would say like PDFs as secure as it can get.
PDFs, the up and coming format that all the kids are asking for. Yeah, and if you love CSS and you have lots of time, sure, style them up with that Confluence exporter. Or if you're like looking for something else, there's something else. Join us on September 10th if you want to see that more in action. All right, very quickly, we have to talk a little bit about maintaining documentation because it's so important. And unfortunately, I have to sum this up very quickly. So each of you, if you could give one tip for our audience around maintaining documentation and improving it over time, what would you say? David, what would you say?
I would say look at your most viewed articles in your help center, for example, and then think about it. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that people visit that article that frequently? Oftentimes it can just be very helpful, but sometimes it also points at just maybe oversights in the product UI or elsewhere.
That is such a good tip. All right, Erica, what do you have for us? What would you tell the masses?
Support is a gold mine. Like where documentation shows where maybe your product is lacking something, then support shows where your documentation is lacking something. So it's always good to work with the people that are facing the customer in support.
Such a good point. Most documentation models mean you're not going to make money with documentation. There's exceptions to that, of course, but you can save money. And you can look at, support tends to grow linearly or even exponentially based on your user base. And you can use documentation to reduce support spending, especially with AI-enabled tools connected to said documentation. Yes, such a good tip. How about from you, Laura?
For me personally, a game changer was a really pain is keeping screenshots up to date. Because your product changes and the screenshots will be outdated probably in a month from now if I put them in now. So one thing that I learned to do was kind of to do this, to create the centralized inclusion library. So with the include page macro in Confluence, what you can do is you can set up a space where each page, for example, has one screenshot, and you title the page in a way that you already know what that screenshot will show. And then what you do when you update your UI, for example, is you just go through that inclusion library, so through that space, through all of the screenshots and see if they need to be exchanged. Because sometimes you want to use a screenshot more than once in your documentation on several pages, so that way you don't have to update it on every page, but just centrally once. And it's also more organized, so you know where to look for. So that was, for me, a game changer.
Such a good tip, especially like even just the names of things change or the text, or if you've changed the name of a feature, not only do you need to update the image, but you also need to update the description and the alt text on that image. And rather than having to do that in 10, 20, 200 places, you can do it in one spot. Oh my gosh, we could talk so much more about content reuse, but we don't have time, y'all. If you would like to talk more about documentation, let us know in the chat. We are full to the brim of things we could talk about around documentation. We have a lot that we are writing about that very subject. We have more resources coming toward you. They're just not ready yet. If you would like to explore a little bit more about K15T's apps and how they can help in the documentation process, check out the link in the chat and join us on September 10th for that. You'll see at least one of the faces joining for that. That will be excellent. See you on September 10th if you want to explore scroll apps a little bit more. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter. We send it out every week. It is all about the very best of Confluence. Patricia is absolutely rocking with that. We just covered, for example, live what are they called? Audio briefings. Audio briefings have just been added to Confluence, and we just sent out a newsletter all about those and what you can expect there. Check it out. Subscribe for all new hot Confluence-ness dropped in your inbox every week. Y'all, thank you so much for joining the live stream. David, Erica, Laura, it has been such a pleasure having you all here. I'm glad people don't have to just hear from me. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone in the chat.
Yeah, the chat has been absolutely killing it today. Y'all, thank you so much for joining. Check out the rest of the videos and our YouTube channel. There is so much more there. Like and subscribe, of course, to continue to keep up with us as we are creating new content. And of course, continue to explore with us as we look at the very best ways to use Confluence to share what you do